Hello, 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 everybody. It is Corey Poirier back again with the Amplify Your Message event, part 2 of day 1. And super stoked to jump right back into things where people will be joining us that were on before, and new people. We'll give them a second to join in. So if you weren't here earlier, the Amplify Your Message event is the event where we help people launch their podcast, launch their writing career, launch their speaking career. And I say that, I use the term loosely. Really, with this event, we just want to help people get started. And so first things I want to do is introduce my co-host. So Kelly Filardo, I say introduce you. You've been my co-host for the event. I think we're going back now. This is our third Amplify Your Message event together. And so Kelly, can you tell the viewers and listeners just a little bit about yourself before we jump right in?
Sure. So I got burnt when I was 2 years old, and I never ever thought that I'd have a great life, but I ended up becoming a speaker about 10 years ago. And then as a result of being a speaker, I was encouraged to write a book and then become a best-selling author. And so now I have, in the past 10 years, I have 6 books of my own and that are all best-selling books. And now I coach people to also write their books and get their message out there in a big way. So yeah.
Awesome stuff, Kelly. Well, thank you again for joining me. And my background, most of the people tuning in maybe know my background, but for the purposes of today, I'm the founder of Blue Talks, which is essentially, I always say to people, if you took Chicken Soup for the Soul and TEDx and got them married and they had a baby, that would be Blue Talks. So essentially, our goal is to marry business, life, and universe, which are the 3 letters for Blue Talks, or for Blue. And yeah, thank you so much, Kelly. And so the idea is we want to help people in all 3 of those areas. So spirituality mixed with business, mixed with our life stories, and want to share powerful and empowering messages to people around those areas. But for the purposes of this event under the Blue Talks banner, again, we want to help people take their influence to the next level. And so having said that, if you want to know any more about Blue Talks, the best place to go is bluetalks.com. So having said that, I don't want to waste any of our guests' time. I want to get every ounce of nuggets and gold we can out of him. And so I'm going to bring him right up under the screen. And so Chandler Bolt, so exciting to have you here. Chandler, before I tell you about how much of your stuff I know, Chandler, maybe what we get you to do, and I like to do this rather than me read a bio or on a screen or a paper. Can you tell us just a little bit about yourself, and we'll dive further anyway?
Sure. Yeah. College dropout, C-level English student, Southerner, turned writer and creator of a school called Self-Publishing School. We're an online education company. We help people write and publish books. And more specifically for most people, it's using books to grow their business. So using books to get more lead sales and referrals for your business. I host the Self-Publishing School podcast, as well as the 7-Figure Principles podcast. So podcasts on writing books and using them to grow your impact income or business. And then the other one's just kind of a more fun side project on scaling companies. We've been Inc. 5000 company last 3 years in a row. So one of the 5,000 fastest growing private companies in America. And that's pretty much it. I'm passionate about changing people's lives through books. And we believe that books change lives, and books change the lives, not only of the author, but also of the readers. And so we talk about leveraged impact. So the ability to crystallize your information into this book that will help thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even millions of people, and live long after you're off this earth. So that's what we're passionate about. And that's how we help people.
I love it. And, I know Kelly's going to jump in with some questions right away, but I wanted to say that I discovered you long before your podcast, but with your podcast, I have to say, I don't know if there's a record for the amount of times people have listened to each episode. And I don't know if I'd be in the contention, but I've at least listened to every episode 4 times. And of every episode up until you took the break. So that was the break. And so we listened to the episodes. I figure I listened to, I think it was worked out to like 65 times or 80 times total. But the big reason was as I was getting ready to release my book, and there's so much gold in those episodes, I was like, I got to keep re-listening. And Kelly, I know I told you about the podcast, that you got to listen to this podcast every time you can. And I've told other people. So it's interesting how I knew of you before the podcast, but it's amazing how much you feel like you get to know a person more through a podcast. I just have to add that in right now.
For sure. I appreciate that, man. Thank you. That means a lot. And we got a bunch of great new episodes coming out, hopefully even better than the first season after a long hiatus. So it's I really appreciate that.
Well, I was wondering if the show was, for lack of a better way of saying it, done. I mean, you see, like Seth Godin,
Yeah,
the show.
it was.
Okay, so it was. Well, I was gonna say Seth Godin had the
Yeah.
show, and then like he basically stopped. I think it was 5 years ago, and it's still one of the top rated shows, and he hasn't put an episode out. So I thought maybe Chandler put the episodes out, and then it's done forever. But we'll still, people will still discover the show. So I guess that's a good starting point. Is you said it was done, and now it's not. So what made you decide to revisit it?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I mean, people were listening to it, getting value from it, and signing up for self-publishing school, and I didn't even know it. And so there was kind of a moment where we had two books or two students sign up within a 24-hour period, both from the podcast. And so it was a bunch of revenue, and I was like, hold up, people are still listening to the podcast? And then I went into the stats dashboard. I was getting thousands of downloads a month. And doing pretty well. And we hadn't talked about it in years. And so it's like, okay, hold up, let's bring this back. Let's be way more intentional about both the interviews, the promotion, all that stuff. And we feel like it's a way that we can add value, serve people, and bring in customers for SPS. So that's kind of the goal. And that's why we brought it back. And then right on the heels of that, we kind of turned the 7-Figure Principles show, which is a bunch of 5 to 20 minutes teachings on the principles I've learned from scaling a business to multiple 7 figures over the last few years. And so it's like all the non-sexy operational stuff, or like goal setting, or how do you run an offsite? How do you hire? Like all those things. And that wasn't getting much traction on YouTube. And I got to thinking about that. And it was, I was thinking, well, hold up. I don't watch videos on YouTube on how to grow my business. Like my target audience isn't there. So let me go where the target audience is, which is listening to podcasts. So we turn those. I mean, it's very easy, just swap to those for podcasts because it was just straight teaching. And so we turned that into the 7-Figure Principles show, and now that's gaining traction. And so we went from 0 to 2 podcasts, and there definitely is. It's like it's ongoing work for sure. But I think the fruit is very meaningful, and it's adding value to a lot of people and helping people when they're coming on their journey. Just kind of like you said that you were is when they're working on their book. So.
Love it. And so, Kelly, I know you're familiar with and aware of Chandler's work. So, Kelly, I think maybe I'll pass it over to you to see if you wanted to introduce yourself a little bit and maybe pose a question or two to Chandler. I have a bit of trouble here on my link, so I'm going to just jump off and jump right back on. But I'll let you pose a question or two to Chandler, and then I'll jump right back on here.
Sure, sounds great. Well, Chandler, it's funny that we are talking with you because I have been following you. And so I've been getting your emails every day and everything. And, I love the work that you do. I love, how passionate you are about helping people. So, tell us more about that. Like, why are you so passionate about helping people to become best-selling authors?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of reasons. It's kind of like I said at the beginning, like I believe that books change lives. And so coming from someone who was a college dropout and a C-level English student, and then I kind of took the college dropouts approach to learning, if you will, which is, all right, I'm no longer in school. I dropped out of school because I got tired of learning how to run a business from professors who had never ran a business. That didn't make too much sense to me. And so I dropped out, but I said, hey, I need to treat this like I'm still in school. And I call it the college dropouts approach to learning. I got a video on the 7-Figure Principles show and podcast and all that on that topic. But essentially, this is a $15 mentor, right? It's like all the smartest, most successful people on the earth have written books, and you can crystallize all their the best things that they know in for $15 in a few hours. You can learn from them. And so I kind of looked at that as like, okay, these are my $15 mentors. And it's the core of how I've built self-publishing school is reading books and hiring great people and learning, just learning and continually learning. And so I've seen that change my life as someone who didn't like reading and didn't like writing. But then we've seen that change the lives of so many of our students. And I just believe it's one of the best things that you can do to grow your impact, your income, and your business. And that's what I've done. And so take our own medicine, drink our own Kool-Aid, eat our own dog food, whatever you want to call it. And that's what we do in the business. And that's even all of our employees is like, they write and publish a book typically within the first year that they're with the company. And because I believe in it. And so there's a lot of other things kind of along that journey of why that's meaningful to me, but that's at the core of why I'm passionate about it.
Right. And, it's interesting because, I'm a best-selling author myself. And one of the comments that I get people say to me is, well, there's no money in a book. And I just kind of laugh at that because my book has actually taken me to having a documentary about my life story. So can you speak to that, how people have this whole belief system that your book is just an expensive business card? Because I don't believe it is at all.
Yeah, well, I'm with you, Kelly. I don't believe that it is either. I think even if it was, though, it would still be worth it. Like, even if it is, let's call it an expensive business card. Well, it's a business card that's going to actually get you business. And when you hand someone a business card, they throw it away, typically within 24 hours. If you hand them a book, they keep it. And every time they see it, they think of you. So even if it is just an expensive business card, I think it's worth it. But I agree, it's not. And one thing that we talk about all the time is, it's not about the book. It's about how you become in the process of writing and publishing that book. So there's, I think, all those kind of life skills that you learn. It's something that you're proud of. You're saying, hey, I'm holding this in my hand and I created this. So it's a win. And so for a lot of people that are trying to get started, it's like, for me, it represented one of the first things that I'd done in the entrepreneurial world that was like truly successful when I was trying to drop out of school. So it was kind of an emotional win and a momentum builder. But then if you do it correctly, I truly believe that, sure, you're not going to get rich from the book itself and from the royalties itself, but how do you use that and leverage that into the other areas of your life? And whether it's from an impact perspective, if that's what you care about, whether it's from an income perspective or from a growing your business perspective, like just leading into those other areas. And so, I recommend that people integrate it into all the things that they do, or like, it's like you said, it's that led to a documentary for you. For some people, that's maybe TV interviews, podcast interviews, local PR, newspaper, radio, all that stuff. And then that carries into all of the other stuff that you're doing. Even if it's just, for some people, it's, hey, I got a promotion and a raise, or I got a job that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten because I wrote a book on this. If you have a business, it's just a no-brainer from a lead, sales, and referrals perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I honestly believe that a book is one of the easiest ways to become an expert or to look like an expert.
Yeah. Well, it's the root word of authority is author, right? And so you can't become an authority. You can, but it's a lot easier to become an author, an authority if you first become an author on that subject.
Right. Absolutely. Cool. So once people have a book, what is the next direction you like to steer them in?
Yeah. So, two things. There's the rollout of the book. And so I'm a firm believer in what we call, it's like the Toyota Camry launch versus the sports car launch. And so most people, when they think about launching a book, they think sports car launch. It's like, I'm going to spend all this time, all this effort. I'm going to focus it all on week one. It's just like a sports car. Shoo! It goes by really fast. It uses up a lot of fuel, aka your energy and time, and then it's never to be seen again. Right? It's just like gone in a flash. Whereas the Toyota Camry, I've owned a couple of those growing up, and every single one of them had over 200,000 miles of them on the car. And it's like a Toyota Camry just keeps going and going and going and going. And so what we like to think about and talk about is, how do you set up your book for success, not only just in week one, but beyond that, so that like month after month, year after year, it keeps selling. And so that's kind of the starting point specific to the launch side of things. But then to more specifically answer your question, is like, okay, I have a book, now what's next? Is we like to just focus on how do you build momentum from the book and into other areas of your life. Or maybe it's just to sell more books. That's great too. So like, that's part of you get it kind of a 2-for-1, the Toyota Camry approach is, all right, so how do I start going on podcasts? That's a great win for most people. Now, how do I roll that into some local PR? So maybe get on local TV, local radio, newspaper, things like that. How do I roll that into bigger PR opportunities, bigger podcast opportunities? How do I roll that into speaking if that's something that you want to do? And so then it's just like it's kind of this snowball effect where it starts with the book, but then you're really using the book to continue building momentum, and it kind of creates this virtuous circle of life, if you will, of like those PR opportunities bring more book sales, which brings more PR and also more PR opportunities, but then also lead sales and referrals for your business, which if you have a business, then I'm looking at, okay, how do I use this PR opportunity to get more lead sales or referrals for my business? Well, also, sure, I'm driving more book sales and building all that momentum there, but like, how do I keep stacking and keep kind of momentum going forward?
Right. That's excellent. And, one of the things that I like to share with people is once you have that title of being a best-selling author, you get to keep that title forever. That's yours.
Yeah.
Yours to keep and celebrate, right? Because it's not an easy thing to do. Not an easy thing to write a book and then, do that launch and become a best-selling author. So celebrate that you're now a best-selling author and you get to be that for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And use that to open doors. And keep compounding and rolling into the next thing and then the next thing and then the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So someone wants to get started. What is the first thing that you would tell them?
Yeah. So the first thing is really two parts. So come up with an idea and get a draft done. And I mean, those are the first two things that are the most important. And for most people, it's like until you have a rough draft written, nothing else matters. And so people will start, they'll do anything besides write because writing can be difficult. And so you want to think about the title, the cover, the marketing plan, all that. But then if you really, that's just a distraction from what you really need to be doing, which is writing the book. So getting clear on an idea, we typically find that, there's 2 or 3 camps here that either you have no idea, you have an idea, or you have way too many ideas. A lot of people have way too many ideas. So it's how do you narrow in on the one book to write first? And one idea, and then go through and once you have kind of your one idea, let's get your rough draft written as fast as possible, because once you get the rough draft done, you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you start to believe that this is possible. So writing quickly does not mean writing poorly. I think in a lot of cases it actually means writing a better book, because you laser focus effort on that. But it's important that you get the rough draft done as quick as possible, and then you come back and build on that. Now, in order to do that, we teach kind of a 3-step writing process. Step number 1 is to mind map everything that you can think of on this topic. So doing a mind map or doing a brain dump. Step number 2 is to turn that mind map into an outline. So you start to organize groups of ideas into groups, which will really become kind of sections for your book. So we'll say you've got 5 groups of ideas. Order those 5 groups of ideas, aka sections, in the order that you want to cover them in the book, and then drill down about 3 chapters per section. So now all of a sudden you've got, step 2, you've got a 15 or so chapter outline that you can use to then roll into step number 3, which is to write the draft. Now, this is kind of fun too, because this becomes a choose your own adventure. Some people speak better than you write. Great, do that. If you write better than you speak, great, do that, right? But either way, you're starting with chapter 1. Spend 10 minutes mind mapping everything you can think of on that chapter, 10 minutes turning that mind map into an outline, and then write the chapter. So that's 45 minutes to an hour and a half. Repeat that process chapter by chapter by chapter, or speak the chapter. That's 10 minutes or so per chapter. Repeat that process chapter by chapter by chapter. And that's kind of the 3-step writing process that we teach to get a draft done as quickly as possible. And again, once you have the draft done, then you can start building that momentum, and you start to believe that it's possible.
I know. I love that, because that's actually what I teach my client to do too, is speak it. And because, what happens when you speak it is that it tends to flow better, because you're not second guessing everything, and you're not editing while you're doing it, and you're not judging it. You're just letting it flow. And I think that's the key thing, is to let it flow.
Absolutely. And I think it's a combo of letting it flow and having a good outline, because that's the problem I see, or that's the mistake I see a lot of people make, is they just turn on the record button on their iPhone, and then 30 minutes, an hour and a half later, they're like, I don't know where I'm at or how I got here. This is definitely not a book. And then they give up on the speaking piece. Right? Yeah, exactly. But because there's no structure, right? So I'm a big like discipline equals freedom. It's like the structure creates creativity and creates freedom within it. So I'm a big advocate of, even if you are speaking it, like, don't skip the step of mind mapping and then turning that mind map into an outline. I think that's super important, because then when you go to speak, you're going to actually have a coherent thought. And it might be weird at first, going like speaking an outline and feeling like you're going point by point is like, feels a little bit rigid, but at least what I've seen in my experience of doing it myself, but then also teaching others, is it starts to flow, and you end up with a much better and more finished product than, I got this thing transcribed, I've got 50,000 words, but it's just incoherent ramblings. And that's a really tough place to be, because if that's your starting point and you're trying to go from there to a polished book that's really good, that doesn't work so well. But if you start with a structure, then you'll save yourself a whole lot more time on the back end.
Absolutely. And once you have a structure, you know where to take your book.
Yeah.
Or where to take what you want to speak about. I know one of the things I did with my dating book is, I find it weird to just record myself talking. So what I did is I did it as a Facebook Live video. And that way it felt like I had more of an audience. And then I would talk about, the 5 different types of men on the dating site. And then I had that transcribed, and it worked well for me. And now that I've done it that way, that to me is the way I'm going to do my next book too, is, just do a video.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. And I've heard of people doing something similar. And then even sometimes it's a webinar, like a series of webinars. Right. Because it's like really what you're saying, which I totally agree with, is like, what is the delivery mechanism that's most comfortable for you? And okay, great. Use that delivery mechanism to write a book. And so maybe that's just speak. Maybe that's a speech. So if you are a speaker, maybe that's a series of talks, maybe that's a series of webinars, whatever is a delivery mechanism that's best for you. I'm a big fan of use what's already working. It says 2 of my favorite questions are, how can we make this more simple, and how can we do more of what's working? And that's why I'm always trying to ask myself, and I'm always asking our team and our clients and all that is, okay, how do we make this more simple? Because most of the time we try to make it way too complicated. And then how do we do more of what's working?
It's totally, and that's the big thing when people come to me is they're like, I didn't realize it could be that simple.
Yeah.
And it can be. Like, nowadays, book publishing is so much simpler than it ever has been before. And you don't have to spend thousands of dollars buying a whole bunch of books to do it, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So mind mapping, outline, write the draft. What is one of the most special moments you've had in the whole book industry?
Oh man. I mean, I think every author, I think every author, the first time that they hold the book in their hands, that's a magical moment. And just the physical copy where you say, hey, I created this. And yeah, that's, I think for me, that was one of the most special moments. And then there's a lot of other special moments of, like, one of the coolest things is just seeing other people achieve that dream. And they've been thinking about it. They've been working on it, maybe even for years or decades, and just getting to the finish line. I think one of the most special stories that comes to mind for me personally is 8-year-old Emma Sumner. Her dad had joined self-publishing school like years earlier, and we helped him do a couple of books. And then she saw that and she said, hey, Dad, I want to do this. And he didn't think she was really going to do it. And she's kind of like, hey, go write, 50 words and come back. And she came back like an hour later. And then they went to Panera Bread like every week. And then she is one of our youngest success stories. And like that just, I think the book made $3,000 or $4,000 in royalties in the first few months. Then she's gotten asked to speak at local schools. And so she like makes money speaking. She has an Amazon allowance, which is really just her book royalty money every month. Like just all the, like her life will forever be changed as a young woman and just the skill sets that she's learned from that, the confidence that she's built from that experience. And so I think that's one of the coolest experiences for me, is just seeing that and seeing the impact that we can have on kids. And now we have kids come to our live events, and kids writing and publishing books and like all this stuff, just because Emma decided to do that. And now she's kind of blazed a trail for other kids authors.
I love it because I have 3 kids, and and one's struggling to figure out what the heck she wants to do, and the other one's, still trying to figure it out too. And it's so cool that you can take your thoughts, make them into a book, get them published, and then sell it. And you don't have to spend any money to do that.
Yeah.
So that's super cool, is that we can have an impact in this world. And, it's beautiful that we're in the internet age. So, so how many authors have you helped?
Ooh, we really need to count this, because it's growing so fast. We have about anywhere from 50 to 75 books published a month. And so it's a growing figure. I know it's thousands at this point. But there's how much we have tracked versus how much has actually happened. And because we're not a publisher, we're an education company. So all of our authors keep 100% of their royalties and all that stuff. So the downside of that is that we don't have a concrete figure, because they have to tell us for us to be able to track it when they publish. But it's been thousands of books published. Our goal, kind of our big, hairy, audacious goal, is 100,000 books published by 2031. Like, that's the goal. So we got a lot of work to do to get there, but we keep seeing gains every single month, and more books published, more success with our authors. And so that's the goal, and that's the North Star.
I know. I love it. I love how easy Amazon is making it so that we can get our books out there and everything. So,
for sure.
So what are your thoughts on self-publishing versus traditional publishing? What are your thoughts?
It's a great question. And naturally, it's something that a lot of people are curious about. So, the long and short of it is that self-publishing makes more sense for 99.9% of authors. And I know the natural reaction is, oh, cool, the self-publishing guy is coming in here talking about how amazing self-publishing is. It truly is. And this is not just me. This is in my as unbiased as possible opinion. And obviously, I run Self-Publishing School and own selfpublishing.com. So it's impossible not to be at least a little biased. But really, the only time that it makes sense to traditionally publish is if you have a big name, a big platform, and you can get a big advance. So if that's the case, you can get a multi-6-figure advance from a traditional publisher. You care about international distribution, stuff like that. Yes, go traditionally published. If you can't, then in a lot of cases, even if you can, it still makes more sense to self-publish. You're going to have full creative control. You're going to have full royalties or a higher royalty rate. So we're talking anywhere from 40 to 60%, 70% royalties instead of 8 to 12% royalties. It's just across the board. It's going to be better if you choose to self-publish. We've got a really good post we can link up along with this on the Self-Publishing School site about self-publishing versus traditional publishing that goes way in depth. And we've got a podcast interview on with Ruth Sukup about how she's sold 500,000 copies of her self-published book. And she's traditionally published 2 or 3 books and self-published 2 or 3 books. And so that's a really good kind of apples to apples comparison of traditional publishing versus self-publishing. So that's the Cliff Notes, and then like 2 extra resources if people really want to go in-depth review of the of kind of the options and all that good stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Can you also share with people what is a hybrid publisher? Like, I kind of know, but I'd love for you to share that with them so they know. There's the self-publishing, there's the hybrid publishers, and the traditional publishers. So
it's a great question. So hybrid publishing, some people also refer to as it like vanity publishing or vanity press or things like that. So you got full traditional over here, you got self-publishing over here, and hybrid is kind of exactly what it says in the name is the hybrid. And so really what it looks like is you're paying someone, most cases, you're paying someone to publish your book and they will likely also get a percentage of the royalties, or some hybrid publishers will do no upfront cost and a higher percentage of the royalties. So it's kind of a depends on the hybrid publisher. Either you're paying for both, or just the royalty piece, or sometimes just the upfront, but that's not very often, if ever. But so that's kind of the difference. And I would say for some people, hybrid publishing makes more sense than traditional publishing. You really just need to make sure it's the hybrid publisher is legit, because it could be anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 to $30,000 to $50,000 for that hybrid publisher, and that's pretty typical somewhere in that range. But they need to be legit, because I've seen a lot of overpriced hybrid publishing packages that are really more just a publishing service sold as a hybrid publishing deal. And in those cases, you're overpaying for the service component and not really getting a lot of the promotion, or like, oh, this is like the benefits of a publisher. So I would say in some cases it makes sense. Vet and make sure that they're legit. And if so, then for some people is a hybrid option. For they say, hey, I don't want to self-publish, or I don't want to fully traditionally publish, but I want to kind of go somewhere in the middle and get some help. And in those instances, I think it can make sense.
Yeah, because sometimes people aren't very techie. I guess it's easy word.
For sure.
So sometimes that's why a hybrid publisher makes sense for them, because they don't know how to, format a book or type a book, or they don't want to, go onto Amazon and publish their book, or they don't know how to do that sort of thing. So I know that's a great reason to go with a hybrid publisher, right?
For sure.
What are your thoughts on Kindle books? Do you focus on Kindle books at all, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we focus on Kindle first, and that for most people is a great starting point, because there's a lower barrier to entry. It's simple. It's all that stuff. And so, but I'm a big proponent of publishing in all formats. So go Kindle first, print second, audiobook third, in that order, because that's kind of the order of difficulty. But again, we want to get a win, and so get the book published, and then if you roll out the print version a month later, well, that's another reason. That's another launch and another reason to talk about it. And then if you roll out the audiobook a month or two after that, it's another launch and another reason to talk about it. So you can kind of get more juice for the squeeze. Doing those three different formats launched separately in some cases. And so for some people that makes sense, for some people it doesn't. But I'm a big fan of doing all three. I don't like the Kindle only approach. I think you're in most cases costing yourself a lot of sales for what's not a ton more work. Like, it's definitely more work, don't get me wrong, but you've already done the hard work of writing a great book. So why not open yourself up to other book sales channels by publishing it in all formats? So I definitely recommend publishing it in all three formats. That's another one of the big mistakes that I see authors making, is not doing that. And especially audiobook. They won't do the audiobook, and in some cases they won't do print or audio. So I think if you're not doing that, you're leaving a lot of money on the table from a royalty perspective. And then I'm not a big fan of the ghostwrite a bajillion Kindle books model. I think there was a time and place where that worked, and even then I wasn't a fan of it, because I think it was mostly crappy books. And so, which just doesn't help the ecosystem as a whole. It's like, okay, I'm just going to cheaply ghostwrite a bunch of crappy books and hope that they sell on Kindle. Like, that doesn't make too much sense to me. It's not a business model I want to build. I'm all about doing things for the long term. And if I wouldn't be comfortable putting my name on it, then I'm not going to do it. And so I think that, but I don't think that there's not many people are doing that still. Some people still are, but yeah, I'm a big fan of all three formats.
That's excellent. Great. Corey, nice to have you on board.
Sorry about that, Chandler. This is our
no worries.
This is our 6th event overall in the last 3 months, and this is the first day I've had any technical hiccups. So, but
no problem.
I wanted to make sure I was stable before I came back on, because I had a great co-host here with Kelly, and I didn't want to interrupt you guys. Now, I didn't get to hear everything that was said, so hopefully I'm not asking a question that was already asked. But Chandler, did Kelly ask you any questions about the list, like New York Times list?
No,
we haven't got to that.
Because that's the area I want to go to, if you don't mind, for a second.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Both on the Wall Street Journal, USA Today,
Yep.
all three, and the New York Times. And I say those areas because everybody talks about Amazon. But and I will say I use some of your strategies, meaning yours and guests, from the podcast to launch my book. I launched this book with Morgan James about 4 months ago now. And of course, actually it was 7 months because it was the pandemic started on the day of my red carpet launch. But I launched it and used some of the strategies I learned. And the book hit the number one on the list, like Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Apple, Amazon, what have you. And I used your strategy, and I got it from one other person about inside the book. I don't know if Kelly mentioned this or you did or not, but having you sign up to get people on your email list. And by the way, that's gold. But my question out of all that is the Wall Street Journal and USA Today. I learned a lot of stuff about those lists when I did my launch, i.e. Canadian sales don't count. And I had a really big number of Canadian sales that did me no good. What have you seen when we talk about those lists? Because those seem to be the ones everybody's vying for. What have you seen now that moves the needle to make those lists, other than, of course, the pre-launch stuff that everybody does? Is there anything you're hearing from guests or you've seen that really makes a difference in somebody making those lists? And by the way, should those lists matter anymore too?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the biggest list that doesn't matter that most people care about and talk about is the New York Times. And it's everyone focuses on that, and it's just a poor goal in my opinion, because it's an editorial list, so it's an opinion. It's not a true bestseller list. So if it rained outside, my girlfriend dumped me as the editor at the New York Times, or I just don't like you, Corey, because you're Canadian. For any of those reasons, I'm kidding, by the way. For any of those reasons, I mean, who doesn't like Canadians? Canadians are awesome. But for any of those reasons, they could say, oh yeah, sorry, Corey, you're off the list, or I'm going to keep you off the list. And I know multiple instances where big time authors sold enough books, which the magic number is 10 to 12,000 copies in week one for the New York Times. But they sold enough books, but the New York Times kept them off the list for any of those reasons. So the New York Times it's a joke. From the list itself it's not a true bestseller list. It's not. So, but then on the flip side, USA Today bestseller and Wall Street Journal bestseller, like those are true bestseller lists. And out of them, the USA Today is really the most true, like pure number of copies sold. There you go. So the USA Today is the most true. And then you can hit some ebook Wall Street Journal lists sometimes easier than some of the other categories or subcategories or whatever else. And so that's the landscape. And then to more directly answer your question, like, okay, what can move the needle? There's a bunch of stuff that I've seen work well. We teach, and you probably heard this and did this, especially if you listen to some of the podcast interviews, but the launch team process. So building the launch team of 5, 10, 15, 50, 100 people, and then focusing those efforts and all those folks reading a digital version ahead of time, leaving a review on day one, and that being super, super important and a big driver. And then outside of that, there's putting promos on week one, whether that's promotional sites, things like that, doing kind of your pre-release list, all those things. So you already mentioned that. But then really outside of that, a lot of people have had a lot of success with podcast tours. And so just like you would go on a book tour, and especially during the pandemic, it's like, well, that's off the table. So let's do a podcast tour. And in a lot of cases that can work even better, because who's buying books? People listening to podcasts. I mean, so how can I get in front of the right podcast audiences? And that's more important than just kind of a spray and pray approach of just like, get me on every podcast, which that's cool. But like, you really want to make sure that, okay, who are the 1 to 3 avatars for this book? We call about like the 4 P's of a high converting offer or a top selling book. It's like person, pain, promise, price. So the person, the pain, and the promise that you were making to them in this book, like how do we make sure that I'm on podcasts that are in front of those audiences? And sure, I can do the other stuff like local TV, local newspaper, all that stuff, but that's not going to be a Move Books perspective so much as it is like the credibility outside of the launch itself, and building credibility in order to grow my business. And so if I'm talking strictly to sell books, it would be podcast tour. If I'm talking leverage the book to grow my business, it would be a lot of the PR and social proof stuff.
Well, it's interesting when you say that because I know Pat Flynn's interview with you, he mentioned that he didn't even know it was possible to make the list with a self-published book. I think it was USA Today he was talking about, or Wall Street Journal, one of the two. And I know he said that podcasting did it for him, was a big part of it. Obviously his own network and sharing with his list and that. But then I heard, I don't know if it was on your show or if it was somewhere else, I heard Hal Elrod. I heard saying that header somewhere, how I sold 1 million books on podcasts. And I'm still trying to crunch those numbers, see how that's possible, because that's a big number on podcasts. And but I mean, what I need to do is I need to bring Hal on, do an interview with him and ask, what shows did you pick and how did you decide what shows to pick?
Yeah.
But if you look at both those cases, I mean, whether it was 1 million directly from podcasts or not, if those numbers are even a fraction of close, we need to study, what those did.
When I think he did, we were talking before you came back, Toyota Camry launch versus the sports car launch. So kind of this idea of building something that's going to keep going for a long time. And he did, if I'm remembering correctly, 210 podcasts in year one of podcasting. So it's and so yes, like do as many as you can ahead of time, have them all launch on week one, but then keep doing those and keep talking about the book. And I think that's the mistake that a lot of people make. And I mean, Hal's a really good friend of mine, and we'll go out to lunch or dinner or something, and like he'll meet the waiter or waitress and like, oh, let me go to my car and let me give you a book. Like it's just like he's always got books. He's doing podcast interviews, talking about the book, like across the board.
Well, and one other thing I want to ask you about before we start bringing things to a close, Chandler, is about, I want to ask you about one thing, but just to tag on to what you just said too, about the people selling enough copies to make the list, not making the list. I think the most extreme example I heard, and I'm not saying it's the most number of sales I heard, somebody have and not make the list, but extreme example I heard was Jeff Walker. Who sold Launch. I think the number was like 28,000 copies or something, and didn't make the list. And he knew people who knew people, and I think there was somebody on that same list as him that sold 7,000. To your point about numbers,
yes.
But then my understanding is everybody reached out and said, "Jeff, what's going on? You're not in the list. This doesn't make sense." Like Brendan Bouchard and I think Michael Hyatt or whoever, and said, "Let's get you on the list." And they went twice as hard the next week, and the next week he had similar numbers and made number one. The previous week he didn't make the list at all.
Exactly.
And what
I think we talk about that in that podcast interview.
Well, actually, I'll tell you where I heard it was from my publisher, because that's who's his publisher, Morgan James too. And having said that, that's a prime example. And my understanding of, the thinking of why it might have happened is because he's into the marketing space, and they were worried that he gamed the system somehow, even though he didn't. And it's almost like, well, he's an internet marketer guy, so maybe he did something, so let's just not put him on the list.
Yes.
But you couldn't do that, like you said, with a pure numbers list.
Yeah. For sure.
So having said that, my other question, and Kelly, you might have one more still as well, because I kind of jumped in between here. But my other question then, Chandler, is what do you think, and you and Kelly maybe have talked about this, but what do you think is the number one thing that you see that people can do with a book when we talk about Move the Needle? What's the number one thing they can do to gear their book for success? I know it's a massive question.
Yeah. Write a good book that solves a real problem for a specific audience. That would be the most succinct answer, and begin with the end in mind, and then layer on all the other stuff that we talked about.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I was saying earlier today, I think one of the biggest things that a lot of people get wrong is not even knowing what their goal is for the book, not knowing what I want the outcome to be. And I feel like too, there's sometimes, like, I have some books here because I was talking with you earlier today, but Celestine Prophecy is an example. I mean, it's a fictional tale. And it was a book, I think, that was written with, to your point about it, for a specific audience with a specific situation, which is James wanted to bring more spirituality and consciousness to more people. So it's interesting how even with a fictional book, you can have that in mind. But then when I showed my book earlier, it's not a book with a big back end, and it was intentionally done that way. Like the Four Agreements, Alchemist, Celestine, they weren't necessarily written with a back end in mind. But then you have books like, the book like Launch. There you go, Four Agreements. The Launch book, that was a book that was obviously written with an end in mind.
For
sure. I agree with you completely, as I think we need to know what our goal is, know where our audience is, and what pain are we solving. And I think, like Jeff, solving the problem that most people don't know how to launch when they're just starting. And so I love that. But I also think it's important for people to recognize when they see a book, a fictional book, that's still meant for a business type audience, there can still be that problem they're trying to solve. It just not be as clear.
Yeah, and those are often fables, and even a fable needs to demonstrate a clear problem. So I want to bring. I just haven't gotten an in yet, but I want to bring Patrick Lencioni on the Self Publishing School podcast to talk about exactly this, which is how do you write great fables, but then also how do you use fables to grow your business? I mean, he's a prime example of amazing books, all fables, and has grown a ridiculously successful consulting company off the back of all those fables. I mean, the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, for something of an executive. He's got The Advantage. He's got, I've read probably at least 4 or 5 of them, and they're all great. Death by Meeting, multiple others, but all those are like solving a specific problem for a specific audience, and a great book, right? And so, but he knows what the audience is, and what the problem is for each of those fables.
Well, to that point, you made me think of Robin Sharma, who wrote, I think 3 of his books, maybe out of 11 are fables. They aren't all fables. But, he'd be somebody to bring on as well, because The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari was like obviously a runaway. And then he wrote The Leader Who Had No Title, which was also a resurgence runaway. It'd be great to interview him as well, because he doesn't do a lot of podcast interviews. So he'd be really surprised for people. It's interesting when you said about writing a really good book. Again, back to the Celestine, James, what he did is he picked a group of 50 people. And this is going back to 93. So this isn't like, this is early on to do this. And he said, if I send you the book, will you read it and tell me where you get stuck? Because I want to know which pages aren't page turners, which I thought was a brilliant way to approach it. And so he went to those 50 people, and he wouldn't leave the book until they all said, I couldn't put it down. And he said it took a year to do that. But it's interesting because I heard somebody on your show, and I can't remember the name of who it was, you might remember from me saying this, who talked about how they did it now with today's technology. And they went to like Fiverr or something like that, and they pay each person $25 and said, will you read people they didn't even know, will you read my book and tell me what you don't like and what you like? And that was their way of kind of focus grouping it to make sure the book got better. And so, it's a great example.
Yeah. When a lot of times when people are writing a book about your area of expertise, you've already done that. It just wasn't specific to getting beta readers, right? It was leading a bunch of workshops, or it was going through a bajillion client consults or webinars or all that. And it's like, this was boring. This was really a hit. This joke was funny, and people really related to that and came up afterwards and talked to me about that thing. When I gave this talk, it totally bombed. Or this part, like people's eyes glazed over and they kind of stopped paying attention. So it's like, you've gotten that real world feedback. And I think that's the benefit of, if you are writing a book on an area of expertise that you have, is you've workshopped it. It just wasn't specific to beta readers.
Love it. Well, Chandler Bolt, this has been an absolute pleasure, which I knew it would be. There's never enough time, so I'll maybe call it a to be continued. But Kelly, unless you have any additional questions, I just want to ask Chandler how people can learn more, where they can connect with him, if they want to work with you, what that looks like. Are you still taking on clients in the book world? I mean, so those are all my questions just to close it out in terms of what the hub is. But Kelly, did you have any last thing you want to ask Chandler?
No, I was going to say the same thing. How can people get in touch with you, Chandler? And so that they can find you.
Yeah. If you're more great content on writing and publishing books, subscribe to the Self-Publishing School podcast, or the 7-Figure Principles podcast. Those are 2 great resources. We've got tons of great resources on the site. We've got in-depth posts on how to write a book that has all kinds of like book outline templates and copy and paste Word docs that you can use to start just actually do a lot of the heavy lifting. And then lastly, if you say, hey, this is awesome, like I want to work with you guys, just book a call with the team, self-publishingschool.com/apply, self-publishingschool.com/apply. You can book a call with the team, chat strategy, and see how we might be able to help you with your book.
That's excellent.
And I just
thank you guys. This was awesome.
Absolutely. And I just put that in the comments as well, Chandler, because we get the biggest bulk of our viewers these days on replay. And so I'll make sure that it's in the comments there. This has been, like I said, absolutely awesome. I'm a big fan, as you could tell from my knowledge of what you do. And I will say that what I also love that you highlight people that are in your program, and not everybody does that. Like some people just go to the big names, but I know that you're sharing stories of successes in your program too. So I think that's another reason to apply, because you might be a future Chandler success story.
That's awesome. Thank you, Corey. I appreciate the support. And thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Corey. This was awesome. Appreciate it.
Welcome. Thank you, Chandler.
We'll let you run and have an amazing rest of your week. And again, we'll call it a to be continued.
Yes, sir. See you guys soon.
Bye, Chandler.
Awesome. So Kelly, I'm going to bring on our last but not least guest that we happen to know. I'm going to bring him on right away so we just maximize his time too. So Ken, can you hear us and see us?
I can. Am I coming through all right for you guys?
100%, my friend.
Perfect. Nice to see you both.
Yeah. Great to see you, Kent. It's been a while since I've seen you. We got to see you before COVID hit, so that was awesome.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been back to Canada, so nice to see you both virtually.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All three of us are Canadians. Isn't this fun?
Exactly.
It's definitely on this event. It's definitely a mixed bag. I would say 50% of the guests on this are Canadian or were born in Canada. We have a big Canadian following, not just viewers and listeners, but I mean the guests as well. So that's not a surprise to me. So Kent, I brought you on to talk a little bit. I'm going to say a little bit different as far as our topic area than maybe some of the people we are bringing on today to talk about the book world. I wanted to bring you on to talk about influence and your experience in that world, because you happen to have an amazing network that you and I are going to be working to get Blue Talks on soon, but have an amazing network that I'd like to dive into, your experience working with influencers and also highlighting and profiling influencers. And so, Kent, if you don't mind, where we usually like to start, rather than me read somebody's bio while holding a piece of paper, is to get you to tell us a little bit about yourself so we can, and then we can dive in a little bit further, but so that we can get to know who you are.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having me on. And like we were saying, I'm Canadian. I was born in Edmonton, lived in Calgary, moved to Los Angeles 9 years ago, roughly. And I've been working in the technology and media space for quite some time. Started a company called Connect TV, and it's on my my little link below there. So it's phonetically said Connect, but it's KNEKT. And it's a socially conscious digital network. We're on Apple and Roku. And we started primarily working with a lot of nonprofits to bring awareness to different causes. We're still doing a lot of that. We've got a really exciting event coming up December 13th with Josh Duhamel hosting for bringing awareness to the anti-poaching efforts and all the things going on in Africa. So still heavily involved in that. And then we've also began within the last, I think, 4 or 5 years working with a lot of people in the mindfulness space. So with that comes a lot of authors, speakers, and coaches. Kicked that off with some good friends, Dr. Addie Jaffe and Sophie Jaffe. We had a really great sort of influencer trip, if you will, to the Cayman Islands, where I got to work with 13 influencers, all mostly in the health and wellness space. And from there, started working more with Sophie on the cooking side of things, doing her cooking shows, and Addie on the, he works a lot in the addiction treatment and clinical psychology side. And then they've got some couples coaching. And then from there kind of branched out, and we've got, probably over 50 different series now on Connect. We just launched some new ones this week. So we do live events. We've got episodic and series, and then over 13,000 videos on the website, which are all sort of within that realm. And we get to work with wonderful authors. We've actually filmed and produced some courses with people like Jay Shetty. Worked a lot with Shaman Durek, and people that are, already have a lot of influence. And then also to help people that are sort of up and coming to cross over and find other collaborators to help them get their message out, to reach more people and connect in meaningful and authentic ways.
I love it. And one of the other ones I think is Tom Bilyeu. I think he's on the network as well.
Yeah, so we've so part of our partnership with Jay's company, Icon Media, is we do bring on some of their partners. We've worked with Jay on, I think we've done 6 different authors that have come on and done live talk shows that we've done. This was all pre-COVID, so in-person conversations about their books. And we actually, another fellow Canadian, Todd Herman, funny quick side story, he was my restaurant manager back in 1996 or 7 at Joey's in Edmonton. And he's gone on to become a great world-class coach. And funny enough, we hadn't seen each other for about 20 years until he walked into Jay's penthouse to film his episode with Jay. And it was a pretty cool moment. And so I'm kind of rambling on, but that's the gist of it. Yeah.
No, I love it because it talks to the point that, which a lot of people don't realize, how small the world is and how small even the influencer world is. You know, when people say to me, I want to connect with so-and-so, or I could never connect with so-and-so is a better even example, and they don't realize they're only 1 degree away. You know, and sometimes all it could take is them posting on Facebook and say, hey, I'm trying to reach out to so-and-so. Anybody that might know them, can you connect me, or can you send me a private message if you know how I can connect with this person? Most people don't realize they're only 1 or 2 degrees away. So you've discovered that probably moving from a place like Edmonton and then moving to the big city of LA. You've probably seen that, how, like you just said with Todd. I mean, what are the odds on that happening?
Yeah, it just continues to get smaller and smaller. And another quick funny side story: Jenny Giles, Real Food Scout is her handle and everything. She sent me a text message saying, you got to go look at Jay Shetty's Instagram story. And he had just moved to LA from New York, and Alex Kushner, his business partner. And they were looking for a live production company. And I was having a little dinner party. And so I stepped off to the side, sent them a quick email, had a call with Alex the next day. And then the following day, we were shooting the first live talk show with Jay and Kim Perrell. And then turns out Alex, it was his first week in LA, and became one of my closest friends. And if he's watching, congratulations. He just got engaged to Ashley, who I introduced them to a couple years ago. So as you said, it is funny how everything is literally 1 degree of separation away, and you never know how that one moment could change the rest of your life by either reaching out or making a connection or just helping somebody.
So where I'd like to go from there then, Kent, is, can you tell us, I mean, you've had this unique opportunity to spend time with a lot of top level influencers. I mean, you mentioned people like Jay Shetty and Shaman Durek. Can you tell us, have you noticed some common traits that they share? You know, people are wanting to sort of become the next level influencer or make a difference in people's lives. It's always great to know what the best of the best do. So is there anything you've noticed that maybe traits, characteristics, or anything that sort of stand out?
I think that it's probably authenticity would be the first thing that comes to mind. And having worked with some of, like you said, some of the best, and some of the people that are striving to get to that place. Can I give an example and keep this in a positive light? If you were to imagine going into a yoga class and then you leave and you get in the car with the instructor and he's yelling and swearing at people for cutting him off, that's just not harmonious and true authenticity in what you're practicing and what you're preaching. So I think that's the biggest thing for the inward piece, is just to be authentic. And then with that will come helping other people. And I think that, as you mentioned before, and as I've seen, it is a very small community. And finding ways to help others is what's going to have them remember you or come back and do something nice for you. And that's some of the indirect connections that I've made have just been through those kind of connections, where it's either, sharing stuff. Lewis House, for example, we did meet personally a couple times, but he didn't remember that. And I had shared some of his content, and then he ended up reaching out and invited me to his events and things like that. So I think it's just reciprocation, and helping others to succeed will help you to, like the old saying, with the rising tides rise all boats, or something like that. I'm probably butchering it, but you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're pretty close to the saying. I think it is something close to that. So having said that, then, I mean, we've got a couple of things there, but one is authenticity. Two, it sounds like being of service to others, to actually give and not expecting to give in return. And then to realize what we're talking about, that it is a small world and people talk and people. So if you treat somebody like garbage that knows somebody else you're trying to get to, chances are that it's going to get to that person. They're going to find out about that.
Exactly.
And so I think also realizing that you should treat everybody equally and treat everybody with respect. And I mean, you got somebody like Jay Shetty, who has, I don't know what his network is now in terms of how many people are following him, but it's millions and millions. But the other thing, you get to spend a lot of time with him. I think the other thing you probably discovered, like I do, I interview a lot of celebrity influencers, and everybody puts their pants on the same way. Or
exactly. We're all, at the end of the day, humans, and we're all here trying to do something for, if we're in this space, hopefully it's for good, or in the mindfulness space of being of service. But we're all really just people, and everybody has feelings and, dreams and hopes and desires and bad days and coffee stains on their shirt when they're supposed to be going to do an interview or things like that. It's life, it happens. And I think that, and that was something I learned a lot younger on was that we are all just people. And if there's people watching that want to reach out and get to know their mentors or the people they look up to, don't go freaking out and treating them like they're on this crazy pedestal, because that's scary and weird. If you can imagine as your normal self, going to the supermarket and somebody coming up and freaking out because they knew you from elementary school, and treating you the way that a lot of people treat celebrities or people with a big, social stature, it would freak you out, and it's the same for them. So if you do want to build those relationships, think about, how can you be of service to them? What can you do? And that's something that Keith Ferrazzi taught me very early on. And Keith's another great guy, is what can you do for others? And if you can ask yourself that, which is what I asked when I met Keith, what could I do for Keith? It's the man who's the most connected man. I don't know if this was when he Never Eat Alone came out, and it was a New York Times bestseller. But I thought to myself, what could I do to be of service to Keith in that moment? And then from there, if you can practice that, not expect that you're going to get something back every time, but just be of service and figuring out what you can do to help somebody, if it's a famous author or if it's a homeless person that just needs some soup or a sandwich while you're walking into the store. Like those are the things that make a difference. And it's not about keeping tabs or tallying it or a one-to-one, or that will be a one-to-one, but at the end of your life, it'll all balance out. So
absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the name of the book, Never Eat Alone, because when you said the name, I thought, well, some people are probably going, who's this guy he's talking about? So I thought, I'm glad you mentioned the book, because that is such a powerful book. But like all things, I showed the Celestine earlier, and I know you're a big fan. And that book, over 20 some million people have bought it, not including how many have actually read it. And yet I can still bring it up today, talking to friends of mine. They're like, the what? Was that what? And so, no matter how big the book is, there's still a new audience for it, is the thing I've discovered. And, when you think about Chicken Soup for the Soul, what are they at now? 700 million? And they're still growing. So, there's always room for a new audience. So Keith definitely, I think, is one of the most well-connected people in the world. So having said that then, and Kelly, I want to let you jump in as well. You might have a burning question you want to ask Kent, but I was going to ask you as well, when it comes to your network and when it comes to Connect, what have you noticed in that respect that people are resonating with? So what kind of shows that are put on, as you said, in the whether it's the spiritual world or whether it's the human development movement or if it's a Jay Shetty show and stuff like that? Like, what have you noticed that people are resonated with and people are wanting to watch the most?
Well, we do have so many different, wide variety of live events that we've been doing, which were like the old school in-person live events. We were the live production partner for and distribution platform for the Daytime Creative Arts Emmys the last 3 years. And CBS had a little bit more money than us this year. So they brought it back to CBS. They have a lot more than us. And so it was a lot of event to event based audiences that we had found. Within this year, it's moved a lot into the mindfulness, but really sort of self-development, and we've done a lot of stuff in the sort of addiction space. A lot of people, I think, this year are struggling more so than before. And actually, our first big live event was the 320 Festival, where we had multiple music artists and dozens and dozens, if not over 100 panelists talking about mental health issues and things like that. And I think that probably the biggest theme of this year is mental health, just due to the fact that, we're a lot of people are at home and unable to work or trying to figure out new ways to create income. So I think the theme of this year is definitely mindfulness. I think that probably would be the best answer to that.
No, I love it. And so, Callie, did you have a question you want to jump in on before I continue?
Yeah, actually, so Kent, I love you dearly, and your mom, you guys are just so awesome. Like, and I love working with you and your mom, and you guys are great. But what if someone wants to get something on Connect TV? What is the process? Like, are you looking for submissions, or what are you looking for? Like, how can that happen?
Yeah, so anything that's sort of within the space of mindfulness, uplifting, spiritual content, anything that's going to be leaving the audience with some sort of inspiration or some sort of a positive impact, we would love to work with other content creators that are doing that. As we are on Apple and Roku, we just like to make sure that everybody's kind of following the standard specs for 16:9 and have put the audio together properly and those types of things, so that it'll play through really nicely on the TV when you're watching on Apple or Roku. It's a little easier to watch it off a cell phone if the audio is not quite right and stuff, but when you're playing it through on TV, that's an important one. And then we've got a contact us button right on the website, and we'd love to work with anybody that's in the space or that's creating content that wants to get their message out to more people. And like as I was mentioned before, coaches, authors, anybody who's got a good positive message. That's really my mission, is to be here to support them and you guys to be able to reach more people with those positive messages.
Right. That's one of the things that I love about you, is that your mom and you are both, it's just all about heart. Right? It's not about the money. It's all about the heart, and and spreading that positive messaging. Your mom actually texted me a picture. You were like on the front cover.
Yes, that was a big honor. Just actually on that came out on Thanksgiving Day, actually U.S. Thanksgiving, so last Thursday. And so I was fortunate to meet Jack and Allie McGuire, who created Awareness Ties. And they have a very similar sort of mission as I do, and as the team at Connect does, in spreading positivity and impact. And they initially were doing ties for different causes, to different colors, and then they had a bunch of different spokespeople for each of those causes. And then that sort of evolved into the magazine, and then we've done a couple of awareness talks, which are a live talk show that we do on Connect. And that issue in particular, that I was fortunate to have introduced them to a number of friends, and then they asked me if I wanted to do an interview, and then surprised me with the cover. So it was a pretty big honor.
Yeah, front cover. That's awesome. Good for you.
Thank you.
Cool. I know he's so humble. Hey, Corey, look at him. You can see him blushing.
Well, it's I think many Canadians are we have that humble gene, which I think it's a good thing. I think it serves us well rather than the opposite scenario. But I think he's a true Canadian, and I say that's not as a slight to anybody who's not a Canadian. It's just to say that Canadians seem to have that. It's almost like we almost have it to a fault, I think, where like when it comes to say branding yourselves, we're like, oh yeah, well yeah, I do that. Oh yeah, I do this kind of stuff. It's like almost like I'm not gonna tell you, yes, this is what I do. It's like people always ask me, you're a motivational speaker then, right? Yeah, I guess so. And like it's so I think that's a Canadian thing to some degree. So Kent, I guess the other thing I'd like to ask you about then, in relation to putting out a show like this, running a network like this, where people are putting together shows like they are. How important, and I know this is maybe a question that somebody's like, well, how dare you ask this question? Of course it's important, but how crucial is it for somebody to be consistent when they're putting a show out? Because I know people say, I want to get on a network, but yet they're probably not willing to put in the time to have a show come out consistently. So how important is it to the audience that the show is coming out on a regular basis?
Well, I think there's two ways to look at that. And I think that a lot of the big streaming platforms have changed the way that we watch and consume content. I do think consistency is important. And if you can't be consistent, at least get it done. So we launched, and I haven't talked to them about this yet, so I shouldn't say which one, but we did launch a series where we actually spent most of COVID filming virtually. And so each of those episodes is now being released one a week. And then we've gotten other ones. We just launched a partnership with Recovery Today and Recovery Magazine. And so we launched a dozen episodes last week all at once. So it at least gives people a chance to come in and watch and consume things at their own time, or have enough that's there. And I think that when you're doing, it's a little bit different when you're doing YouTube and Facebook content, where the consistency is going to change your algorithms and your rankings and everything else. So I do think consistency is really important. And if you're somebody who, due to time constraints and everything else, can't be consistent, go out, pre-film it, and then just launch it on a regular basis. Because especially when you're doing it with YouTube and Facebook, it'll get deprioritized if you did what we did and just dump it all up at once and then have nothing else for another year. They're not gonna. The bots won't like that as much as if you do a slower release strategy and then are promoting each of them as they come. So,
yeah, that's almost like the Netflix strategy, the binge watch thing, where they just dump like a season, and they work behind the scenes, get the season done. We don't know when it's coming out. It comes out, and then it's like they can go until like another 6 months, and then they're recording. We don't even know they're filming the next route. But because of that, I agree. Like, I feel the same way, Kent, that we're used to that now. We're used to batching. We're used to binge watching. And so us seeing a whole season being dumped at one day is what we're used to now. But further to your point, and I'm glad you mentioned that, the algorithms of somebody who wants content every day or weekly or whatever they're not going to support that, because they want you to be back more often than that. Like, if you dump things on YouTube today, YouTube's not going to reward you for that, because they want people to keep coming back for new stuff.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And it also comes down to the content too. Like, if we were doing more fun learning things, that would be something I might say, let's do a different release strategy and put that out slowly and add it into the email campaign. But I think for something like a recovery and addiction treatment, if people want that and need that content, let's give them as much as we can as fast as possible and let them find what works for them and what that message is that's going to help them with going through what they're going through. So.
Well, I think we're also used to now evergreen stuff too. Like, you look at podcasting, and I was just saying earlier today, I'm trying to think of who we said it to. I think I said it to, I don't know if it was, anyways, let's say Joseph Michelli, I think, who might have been, who we had on to kick things off today, who wrote books like The Starbucks Experience and The Ritz-Carlton Experience. And I think it was him talking about his podcast and how he took a break. And I said, well, the thing with podcasting is, I mean, you got somebody like Seth Godin, who put out a podcast. I don't even know when it was now. Like, I feel like it was 8 or 10 years ago. And he hasn't put a new episode out since whenever they stopped. He never came out and put more episodes out. Like, let's say it was 8 years ago. There hasn't been one new episode since. And this show in marketing is still in the top 100 all the time. And so people are discovering even Seth Godin's work, perhaps, by discovering that podcast that he recorded all that time ago and is basically ignored ever since. So to that point, we are in a different world now where, like you said, having it done is better than only having it done if it's perfect. Yes, that's true. Because it's still out there and it still can exist. And we just talked to Chandler Bolt, who, you saw before he bolted. a cheesy pun. But Chandler put a podcast out that I dived into, and then it stopped. And I was like, okay, well, and it was stuff he recorded during training. So I thought, okay, well, he just, he repurposed it, but that's all he was going to do. I thought he's never going to put it in another episode. And I loved it. And I discovered it after he was already done doing it, and jumped in and listened to every episode 4 times that I know of. And so my point is, think about that. We're still learning from him and discovering that stuff, even though it looks like he's never going to do it again. And then we asked him about it today, and he said he was done. But then he started noticing how many people are signing up for his school, his self-publishing school, because of the podcast. And it's like, oh, maybe I should give some more attention to this if this is my biggest funnel. And so again, he didn't even know he's going to come back. But that's the power of putting it out and leaving it out there, even if you don't have new episodes to put out. So I like how you said that consistency is important, but let's also talk about which way you're releasing the stuff, where you're releasing it, what algorithms they use, and all that kind of stuff, because maybe consistency isn't the only option if that doesn't work for you. So I love that. Yeah. So Kelly, I don't want to hog all the time, so I want to give you a chance if you have any questions you want to jump in with.
So we work with a lot of authors, and so do you help out with book launches, or is this something that we can do through Connect TV, where people can, maybe we could have like a book launch channel or something like that, where you launch new books? And I don't know, just kind of an idea that popped into my head. Is that something that we could do with Connect?
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea, because that's actually part of what we were doing with Jay. Was he was bringing on authors that they were working with and then doing interviews to help launch and sort of promote those books. And then we've done, I don't even know how many lots of in-person live book launches where they would be, at a local bookstore here in LA, launching the book, talking about the book, Q&A, sometimes with another sort of celebrity to introduce them or somebody who'd done the foreword for the book. So those are definitely things that we can do. And in a virtual space, like with this StreamYard technology or other platforms we've used, it's easy to kind of bring people in and get that message out in a high quality and impactful way. So.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, maybe we have to work on that idea.
It's interesting as well because Kent and I chatted about, I won't go into too much of the particulars, but chatted about the idea that I'm working on, some people know that, so I won't go into details, but they might know anyway, a docuseries in the background. It's not moving super quickly, but we're working away. And, Kent and I were talking about a couple of people I want to interview and may not be able to get to interview them in person based on the border stuff right now and COVID. And, him and I were talking about the fact that with the quality of what you can film today, you can actually film the person on the other end and have the camera on them filming the same level of quality as if I was sitting there right in person with them. And me the same, film me on the other end. So that later we can kind of piece it together and make it look like we were in the same room if we wanted to, or we don't have to. Like it could be showing me as a question and like a different background and then them as an answer. And you still don't know really if the person's there or not, but it really comes back to the quality. But that's something that you couldn't have done, I don't know how many years ago, but 20 you probably couldn't have. And so that's another thing I think it's important to note as well, Kent, is that we can still do some of this stuff despite COVID right now. You're seeing that. You're having to learn probably how to work around COVID. So you're probably seeing a lot of that now, but we can still be creative and make stuff happen on film, whether or not we could be there in person. Is that safe to say?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And that was a big pivot for us was like you can't see all the rest of the stuff on the desk right now, but I actually brought in all of the stuff that was normally in storage that we would have backstage or on a production truck and just started setting everything up and just basically playing around with it, figuring out what we could do and then setting up green screens and things like that in friends' garages and then plopping them in other places around the world to be able to create some really cool, fun stuff. And then that led into 320 Festival and COVID, and then a bunch of other sort of bigger festivals that we did. And then lots of series. And we're actually in the middle of 31 live events that we're doing with another nonprofit right now. And then, like I said, the big Endangered Rangers one coming up on in December, which I hope you guys can tune in for and check that out. So.
And is everything online now? Like, is there any big events or small, even live events that you guys are filming, or is everything online now?
We did a small socially distanced fundraising concert in Orange County, which was pretty interesting. They had a bunch of outdoor, really far spaced away tables, and then the band was all separate, and the MC was like 15 feet in front of the band. And then we had wireless cameras and a bunch of other stuff to make sure that nobody was actually within 10 feet of each other. So that was the first actual live, like fully live event that we've done. Maybe that might be the only one that was fully live. But we've done a number of others where it's a hybrid of live and pre-taped. So we've done things with, pre-taped segments and then having one camera operator in a venue with the people speaking or the performance, and then sort of set that up with a big hub of a lot of those. But it's definitely changed where we haven't had all of the equipment in one space doing one event, with the exception of that Divas fundraising concert that was really kind of fun and cool to be a part of. So.
Love that. Well, yeah, it's, we're all learning how to pivot right now. There's, when they say the new normal, it really is a new normal because there's no, what we did call normal before, there's no more of that. Like it's, every day I'm seeing the effects of that. For instance, this live event itself happened because of the fact that we're doing some live talks. We did one in your backyard about, what was it, Kelly, a little over a month ago?
Yeah, a month ago. Yeah, in Edmonton where I spoke. Yeah.
Yeah, at U of A live. We did do one live in person. but we got it in under the wire because now I think everything in Edmonton's pretty much shut down again for live events. And so because of that, that created the need to do this as well so that we could keep creating content for each time we get sort of stopped in doing the live event. And nobody really knows when it's going to sort of pick up again. So yeah, we've all had to learn to pivot. So totally get that.
Yeah, well, it's been really interesting for us too in the fundraising and nonprofit space, where we found that there's been also probably don't have permission, so I won't give exact numbers or companies or nonprofits, but we've had a couple of pretty big ones that have been previously done in person, and you've got venue charges and food and catering and parking and all the infrastructure to set up for a 600 to 1,000 person event, and we've helped to transition those to online virtual events. Even with pre-show cocktails we did with Make-A-Wish and Nigel Barker. So we really getting the feeling of, it's not the same as being in the room, but you're having a drink, you're being able to socialize and see what's going on for these nonprofits. And they've raised a fair amount of money online through online donations and other avenues of connecting with fundraising. Without needing to spend all that money to have everything in person. Or if you want to look at it from a ecological standpoint, without the carbon footprint of 1,000 people driving, flying, all the rest of the stuff that goes into getting to an event, which, we just did the United Nations one on sustainability for their awards. And so it was kind of fitting that literally one person drove to one of our hotel partners over at the Kimpton, and the rest of everyone was at home. So, yeah, it's been an interesting transition in that standpoint too.
Wow. So so you guys are learning. You guys are learning, like all of us, how to exist in this new world and still survive. And so, having said that, I'll ask you one more question about the influencer side as we start to wind down. But have you noticed as well, when we talk about pivoting, have you noticed that influencers that you work with, have you noticed that they're having to pivot, or have you noticed that they're making, doing things differently now, or because of their level of influence that they're able to just kind of keep doing what they've always done? Like, have you noticed the people you're working with having to make different decisions as well?
Yeah, I think everybody has had to pivot and make some changes. I think that a lot of the people, back to the authenticity, that were out there doing good things and putting out good messages, there's even more of a need for that content right now. So they have, for the most part, most of the people that I know that were doing good and were truly intending to be of service have actually done fairly well through this last year. Keeping it positive. I can't really say the same for the influencers that were out there, maybe not necessarily coming from that same standpoint. There's a lot of people moving out of LA that no longer are able to sustain based on some of the old models of maybe being influential in whatever capacity that looked like. So I do think everybody's pivoting, and I think that it'll continue to evolve as everything does. And it's nice to see that a lot of the people that were putting in the hard work before are, they're doing okay and not having it absolutely as horrible as it could be for some right now.
Wow. So yeah, like I said, I'm seeing complete shifts in the way I do things. And so I'm always curious to see how it's affecting everybody else, but it does seem like, for better or worse, it's affecting everybody. We all have to kind of learn to sort of, I guess, accept that things have changed. Kelly, I wanted to ask you before we start bringing things to a close, if you have an additional question or two for Kent that you may not have asked yet, because I don't want to steal all the time.
No, it's okay. We have the traditional TV model, and then we have, the internet TV. And so do you think that, I don't know how to say it, but do you think that there's not as much space in that whole traditional TV model anymore, that we should be transitioning more our content to the internet model? We did my documentary and it got on TV in Canada and, and all that. And then it was okay, so what else should we do with it? Should we still go and try and get it on traditional TV, or should we go into internet TV? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that could take another hour.
Yeah.
The landscape has been changing so much, even since I've been speaking at conferences about this since the 2008, I think, or somewhere in there I started. And I think that as we're seeing, like Peacock and a lot of the bigger networks are launching their own digital platforms to be able to kind of continue to stay in this space. All of the funding and finance models are completely being turned upside down right now. So there's lots of opportunities in the digital space to kind of like Pluto TV and all these other networks that have kind of started small and grown and, you know, have hundreds of $1 million in valuation and are providing content to huge audiences globally. It's a really tough question, and I don't know if we've got enough time, but I think that just trying to stay on top of it and then finding the right avenues for distribution are going to be really important. And there'll be some new hybrids and things that, you know, as we're working through this as well, you know, we're creating some of these live events that are then being trimmed down for VOD, and then those may be ending up not just on Connect, but other places as well. So yeah, it's a really big changing landscape, and yeah, we could have a panel discussion for an hour just on but I think it comes down to, you know, the consistency part and then quality. And for anybody who's in the space that's wanting to get into it, most of the time, if you've got a pretty decent computer now, the cameras will be all right. But get yourself a good mic. And which I don't have hooked up for today, but normally I've got everything running through the system. But making sure you've got the good audio and a good quality camera to be able to capture stuff if you want to take it seriously, and then you can do a lot with it in post when you're editing it. As long as you've captured it and it sounds good, you'll be okay to be able to do something with it later on. But it's really hard to make a Picasso out of dirt. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. So, Kent, so as we start winding down, I mean, I want to get people to know about how they can find out more about Connect TV and where they can find Connect TV. You mentioned earlier the website for people if they want to apply to have a show on, or how to reach out to you. But is there a hub that you would send people to? Is there a place that you would send people to if they just simply want to watch Connect TV? Where would you normally send them? And then I do have one other quick question I want to throw your way as well.
For sure. Yeah, thank you. And it's so it's www.knekt.tv. And so you can go there and watch pretty much everything. Sign up. There's links to Apple, Roku, iOS, Android for all the apps to download from the website. ConnectTV.com is the production site where production inquiries can go to that one. Yeah, so you can find everything there. And then if we haven't set you up with a discount code specifically for Blue Talks, we'll figure that out, and we can drop that in later to make sure that we'll do something special for everybody that would like to either check it out or we'll do some sort of cool promotion for everybody.
I love that. And so, Kent, what I want to ask you is a final question, and we haven't done this today. We might try to do it tomorrow, Kelly, because I know I did it last time. Kent, can you tell us either up from 1 to 3 what your favorite books are and why, since we're talking Author Day?
All right. Well, funny enough, we were talking about Self-Esteem Prophecy. My friends were getting married, and I met a new couple in our socially distanced table of 4 at the tiny reception. There was only a dozen people, so it wasn't a crazy big thing. But we both ended up talking about Self-Esteem Prophecy would probably be number 1 on the path to spirituality for me. Then, this is going to be tough. Probably Keith Ferrazzi's Never Eat Alone, which is not necessarily a spiritual book, but more on relationships, business, just how to be a good person, essentially, and connect with people and build those and foster relationships. And then the third one, there'll be so many people upset if I don't name them. Probably the most impactful one for this year for me has been Shaman Durek's Spirit Hacking, because he pushed to have that out in November of last year, and he talks about all of the stuff that's happening this year in the book. So
That's pretty cool. So it's like futurist type stuff.
Yes, and there's a lot of tools in there for dealing with this. If it's just simple meditation, if you're not like really into the woo-woo side of it, there's stuff in there that will resonate with you, and then all the way through to if you've read all of James's books and others and are really want to get into other things that. I'm not sure what all of the audience is here today, so I won't go too deep with that. But that would probably be my top 3 off the top of my head.
Well, you could definitely pick worse books because I've actually read all 3, and I would stand behind all 3 of those being fantastic choices. So Kelly, like I said, we're going to us. Unless you have anything else you want to add or ask Kent, I want to make sure we respect his time and let him run off. So, you have anything else, Kelly?
Yeah. Well, I love how the universe works. And it was funny because I remember when Corey was saying, oh, by the way, I've got Kent coming on to our Amplify Your Messages. I'm like, Kent? How do you know Kent? And then it was so funny because then I talked to your mom and she said, oh, yeah, Corey and I talked. Remember at your workshop that you did that you were teaching people how to write books? And, Corey and I talked. And we talked for like hours and hours. And then I connected them and I'm like, oh, yeah. And so it's just so cool that here we are now, all 3 of us. And, I just love how the universe works and how, we connect to each other and just like, Connect TV, and it's all about connecting people and connecting the world and the community. So, I want to thank you for the amazing work that you do. Your mom is always, telling me about what you're doing and how crazy busy you are. And, I love the big, huge heart that you guys have. That's awesome.
Well, thank you so much. And back to that point, I see George Caceres is coming on, or if he hasn't been on, I saw him in the poster. He's also an amazing friend of mine. We've been working together for a while with his acting and vocal star, which we have another one in December as well. He's incredible. Do the Hustle. If George is watching this, you should that would be my 4th book, which was George's first. I think, Kelly, you're working with him on the next, if I'm not mistaken.
I am. I'm working on the next. Yeah. It's awesome. We're excited about the next book. So, yeah, he's going to be on our show tomorrow. So we have him on. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, if you're watching today, tune in for George. There's my plug for George.
George is incredible too. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait. Well, Kent, this has been an absolute pleasure. I knew it would be. With your permission, we'll call it a to be continued and look to bring you on again down the road in the future. But until that time, we'll let you run off and continue to make some great magic happen in La La Land. Thank you for being you.
Thank you both so much for having me on, and have a wonderful, wonderful week.
Good.
Likewise,
Thank
friend.
you, Ken.
Much.
Thank you.
Good.
Awesome. So, Kelly, so very cool synchronicity in that way. Like you said, that I ended up meeting Kent through his mother, and I met his mother at your event.
My event. Yep.
Yeah, so it's just such a small world. So the only other thing I wanted to check with you, Kelly, before we run off is there anything else that you wanted to share or mention before tomorrow? I mean, tomorrow we'll be back doing the exact same thing, but just wanted to give you any, last minute, if you want to share anything or add anything.
We do have to let everybody know that we've got the 2nd edition ready to go. So this isn't the cover for the second one. This is the first Blue Talk book, but the second one is now ready to go. So I'm really excited that we're ready to start launching that, and people are, we'll put the link in the comment field so people can start buying the book. And I'm just excited about the whole Blue Talk movement, and everybody is just willing to share so many golden nuggets, which I think is just amazing. We've got this whole virtual world where we can have a huge impact and we can make a huge income, but it's just all about us, putting things into action and making it work.
So agree. And just on that note, just to let people know about tomorrow. And all things Blue Talks, you can find it at bluetalks.com, but we'll put the link for the new booking because that's so fresh and new that it's not even on the Blue Talks website yet. And
we haven't told the authors yet that the book is ready for sale.
100%. So yeah, it's that fresh. Well, it just happened literally today in between stuff. And so So tomorrow, just to give people a heads up before we run off, tomorrow you can expect another amazing lineup. And just quickly, that consists of Chris Cumby. Kelly, I don't know if you know Chris yet, but you will get to meet him. He kicks things off, and he's the real deal. He was the co-host of a show called Be Bold, which was a really well-known podcast. And he has a book called The Success. I believe it's the Success Playbook or the Sales Playbook. But he teaches people how to be successful in sales. And he's done really well with the book, really well with the podcast. So I thought he was a fitting person to join us. You're going to be doing a presentation tomorrow. George, who was just mentioned, just gave a plug for him. So he'll be with us. And then Kyle Wilson will be with us. And for those who don't know Kyle yet, prepare yourself. This is the guy who worked with the likes of Robin Sharma and Darren Hardy to take them to the next level as a coach. And then on top of that, he actually was a business partner with Jim Rohn. If you guys know the legendary Jim Rohn. He helped go online, Jim Rohn's business build, and he was Jim Rohn's business partner. And so Kyle is like the best kept secret in the business world. You guys are going to be blown away. This guy's the real deal. He just had Darren Hardy on his podcast, and he shared that it was Darren shared, I guess, on the podcast. I think it was the first podcast he's done in 4 years. So that's how much he respects this guy. He's willing to do his first podcast in 4 years. And then we also have Coach Bobby Bluford, who is an athlete, a coach, a speaker. So we're going to have him talking about being an influencer. He's an influencer on on Instagram, and an influencer in the health and wellness world. So I'm super stoked. We have a really, really big lineup tomorrow. And of course, we're here all week, and that lineup's going to continue throughout the week. We have some major surprises. We have one person coming up that it's a pre-recorded one, like we did last time around with Kate Erickson. I think we did a pre-recorded, and Lisa Nichols. This time around, we have Shea Robotom. And for those of you who don't know who Shea Robotom is, she has in the neighborhood of about 500,000 followers on LinkedIn. She is she is the LinkedIn, I want to say expert, but she's just like crushing it on LinkedIn. And so from an influencer perspective, she's everywhere. I saw her, I believe it was Gary Vee's podcast recently. She was on Lewis House a couple of weeks ago. Like, she's absolutely crushing it. So I'm super stoked to have her come on. And because it's pre-recorded, I already know some of the insights she shares, and this is going to blow your mind. If you're looking to become an influencer, this lady is there. She's doing it. And by the way, when people wonder, can you still create that kind of influence? She she started pushing on LinkedIn 2 years ago, and she's 500,000 followers.
That's incredible.
So this stuff can still be done. You know, when people say, well, did I already miss my chance? No, you didn't. But obviously, like, she did it with LinkedIn video. She really knows how to master video. And like she said, I mean, all these algorithms continue to change. So it may not be LinkedIn video that you can do it with now, but there is still a way you can do it.
That's excellent.
I just want to put that out there. So we have some really, really powerful guests coming up. So I can't wait to keep sharing them all with you. So thank you so much, Kelly, for joining us today. Thank you, everybody else, for joining us today. We'll call it a to be continued, but the to be continued is tomorrow. We'll be here tomorrow at 11 Eastern again, kicking things off. We'll be talking all things books. And then when we reach Bobby Bluford, we'll talk a little bit about influence like we did with Kent. But for the most part, we'll be talking about books tomorrow. So Kelly, thank you. Everybody else, thank you. You guys give me a purpose, and I'm sure Kelly feels the same.
I do. Thank you so much. It's always a wonderful experience. I've had a lot of words today.
No, it's all good. It's all good. We'll come back tomorrow, and you get a do-over.
Yeah. Okay, everybody take care.
Thanks, everyone. Visit us at bluetalks.com, and we'll find you here tomorrow.
You bet. Bye.